Okay. Oh, I need to spotlight this. Right. So just make yourself comfortable in the chair. Give yourself a few moments for preparation, for settling in, and really using an awareness of your posture to whatever sort of degree of awareness you have. So for people who have done this for some time, it could be very, very subtle. The position of your feet and where your weight is in your feet and so on and so forth. If you're watching this and you're new to this, then it's going to be a much broader awareness of posture. Really, the awareness is the key thing at this point, just to get that sense of anchoring your attention, bringing your attention into your body. This is both one of the key elements in Tai Chi that we want to develop. All Tai Chi and Qigong are intended movements, intentional movements. And you can't bring a conscious intention to something that you're not conscious of. It's straightforward enough. It's also one of the big takeaways, I think. It's one of the big benefits that we get, because this quietening of our attention is such a valuable commodity to take with us into our daily lives. So becoming accustomed to and training mind and body to in a way work together like this, to anchor your thought, to give you that sense of spaciousness, stillness, silence, however you label it, in your mind. It's been shown that does have massive effect on our well-being. So this is a process in Tai Chi that is ongoing for people at all levels. It's a constant kind of process. So continue with that, rubbing your hands together and then tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder and your arm. And the other side. And the upper part of your chest. Belly. And so sit back in your chair, extending your legs. The next sort of stage, if you want to think of it in that way, having brought your attention into your body, generated a sense of just how you're feeling and so on, become more specific about this. And the first aspect of that really is rooting down. This feeling of your weight, your center of gravity dropping. And in this instance, in this posture, it's dropping back into the chair. But it's the process of rooting down as much as the actual sort of method, shall we say, because it's going to change depending on when we change our posture. And with that movement downwards, with that yielding to the pull of gravity that we begin to recognize in our body, we realize that this focusing of our attention isn't just vaguely inwards to our body, but can become very specific. And so we literally become grounded in mind and body. And again, like so many other things in Tai Chi, this is both a key part of the foundation for the whole art. So a kind of starting point, if you want to think of it like that, but also a key takeaway, a key benefit that is cultivated over and over again. After 40 odd years I still wouldn't claim to be able to root down. I mean, I can root down better than I could do 10 years ago or something like that, but it seems to be a never ending process. So now coming back to the upright position, a more practical position, but somewhat harder to find that sense of being grounded and being rooted. Have your feet directly below your knees. This is where we want to get more precise, more aware of our structure. We can get our feet in the right position below our knees, appropriate level forwards. We can tilt our pelvis forwards. We can get some of the weight into our legs. We begin to feel that we're supported by our feet, our legs, supported by our hips, lower back, buttocks. Of course, we're supported by the chair. The combination helps to release some of the tightness and stiffness within the upper body. Letting the shoulders drop, maybe feeling the change in the breathing. And as you lose some of that tightness, grow an awareness of what I would describe as a sense of space. It's like if you're wearing a top that is half a size too small. You can be comfortable, you can be okay, but every time you go to reach out, you can feel the restriction on that. And in the same way, as we release that tightness around the back, shoulders, chest, and so on, then the internal movement becomes less restricted. That could be like breathing, circulation, various other metabolic processes that require movement, which is an awful lot of them, and also a growing sense of the momentum, the energy of the movements beginning to build into harmony. Then beginning to turn your head from side to side, so going through the different parts of the body, encouraging them to loosen off. Aware as you turn your head how much space there is in that area of your neck for movement, and not intending to push against the boundaries of that space. Be aware of those boundaries. Be willing to recognize that those boundaries gradually melt away a little bit. But not to sort of reach a point where you feel the movement being blocked. Think, well, I'm going to push a little down. Our range of movement slowly develops. Then hands in front of your shoulders, circling your elbows around, trying to feel that it's not just your shoulders, but chest, ribs, back and shoulder blades, all engaged in the movement. And then going forwards. Letting your hands drop down, so the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulders, and rotate your arms, winding them around. When we move to a point really just before we will begin to grip tightly, to clench muscles and tendons and ligaments and joints, so that all the movement takes place within that available space. And then raising your hands, fine. Sense of your fingertips moving through the air. Back the other way. Rest your hands down. Now bringing your attention to this central part of the body. It's really from here that we begin to develop the sense not only of an individual part of the body, but of our whole body as we begin to move. Because again, you tilt your pelvis a little more forwards, and you feel your weight moving into your feet. Your head and shoulders go forwards. You push down through your feet. That pushes the hips back. Your pelvis levels off, and your head and shoulders. Try not to stiffen up in your back, and particularly people who are more familiar with this, maybe applying that very important image of moving through water. When we did that, if we weren't doing this in water, imagine water up to shoulder height, then as you move forward, you'll feel the pressure against the front of your body, belly, chest, onto the shoulders, so on. And then when you went back, you feel it in the back. So there's a change in state between front and back, and forwards and backwards, as that slightly denser feeling moves into your back and then flows forwards into the front. And again, people more familiar with this process, we begin to understand how intention affects the body. So there's an intention to feel that density further forwards, pulling you forwards, and then an intention to feel it flowing into your back. So we start to get that sense of the patterns of movement within the body that initially are a reflection of the outer movements that we see. But as we become more familiar with those outer movements, that's what changes around, that the outer movements are a reflection of those inner movements. From the back position, turn towards one leg. A slight variation. Take your time. Feel the subtle changes working through the body. Because those small changes within the body are the ones most likely to be affected by our awareness, by our intentions. And then in the other direction. And then from this forward position, turning in the center of your body, bringing both the shoulders and your head and your weight around. So your weight goes into one of the legs, comes across to the other leg, back into that rear hip, and then across to the other hip as you turn, and so on. And change direction. So Tai Chi and Qigong are referred to as internal arts. And one of the meanings of this is that there's an emphasis on those internal movements. Not because we're not concerned with the external movements. We haven't kind of shut ourselves off from the outside, as it were, but because we find after a while that it's those internal movements that build into the external. And coming back to the center and stepping out. So to begin with, when any of us learn anything new, what we do is we copy the external movement. And what else can we do? That's how we have to learn. But with care and attention, with practice, we realize that each of those movements that we learn externally has some kind of echo, some kind of resonance within the body. And so we gradually learn to refocus our attention on those outwards rather than the other way around. And then on the other side, that's never complete. It's not a lack of concern, as I say, with the external. It's a matter of emphasis. And then So all of these are things that we want to try and integrate into the overall movement. And depending on our experience and depending on how we relate to different exercises, we do that with a greater or lesser amount of what you might call success. But it's a never-ending process, as far as I can see. It's not something that I've done that now and then we move on. This is what we are practicing. So letting your hands drop down, turn your hands palm forwards, and then forwards, and again rotating your arms. This is bird poses. Then your chest open gently here as your hands turn forwards. And as you go forwards and your arms rotate, a kind of contraction in the chest and opening across your shoulders. And those internal changes become very subtle. They're physical changes, but also changes in the nature of the movement, the sense of the energy movement. So to sort of follow up on something I said earlier, we start off, you see this movement, think like, okay, he's moving his weight forwards, he's rotating his arms. And so we begin to follow that movement. As we get used to it, we learn to focus our attention a little bit more. We begin to realize, just describing the chest and the back. But more than that, all sorts of little changes and movements, things that can be quite susceptible to our intentions. Think of them as being like the bricks in a wall, building up into the big. You want more of these? And then leaving your hands facing backwards, arms swinging freely from your shoulders. Fisherman casting. Reminding ourselves that the pace of the movement, the rhythm of the movement, and indeed the flow of the movement has its origins in our foundation, in that sense of being rooted in the movement of your weight forwards and backwards. So that your upper body maintains its shape, of course. It's not that it's not doing anything at all. But trying not to make too much of a big deal out of exactly what the arms are doing. And even with the upper part of the body, feeling here, where do you feel the expansion as your arm swings through? Where does it contract and back? And so on and so forth. Still as though you're moving through water, that's a useful. And then this time, leaving your arms out in front as you come back and just feeling that push up underneath. Like there's a ball floating up through water underneath your arms. You just let your elbows drop, drawing the ball down into your chest. So here, push comes from your feet, arms coming up, sitting back, letting your elbows drawing the ball. But you get used to the movement, and again, particularly people who are more experienced in this. Imagine the ball becoming quite heavy. So at first you imagine it like a plastic ball, plated ball. Maybe imagine it made of wood. It's a bit heavier than maybe of steel, and so on and so forth. Because as we become more accustomed to consciously using our intentions, we use imagery, we use memory, awareness, descriptions, all sorts of things feed into that intentionality. We begin to realize that when we change one of those factors, when we change the image, for instance, we make the ball heavier, it changes how we move. And in particular, with this idea of something becoming more resistant to the movement, we begin to build this sense of inner strength, inner resilience. Next time, just a slight change as your arms come up. Turn your hands palm in, drawing your elbows apart, feeling the expansion through the front of your body, especially chest, and then chest. We're always looking for the connections between different parts of the body. When one part of our body is in motion, the whole body is in motion. Not something to take literally, physically. Of course, some parts of your body are still, but all parts are engaged. And again, this can relate to the sense of the flow of energy too. Doesn't always require a massive change. Just to see the head. The pigeon spreads its wings. And this very similar in some ways, but more focused, coming back, elbows coming out, but hands staying in front of your hips, and then turning forwards. This is pushing away, but more focused. I mean, you need more definite action, shall we say, and a definite purpose of pushing against something. So not just more focused, but a stronger feeling beginning to develop. Again, this quality of internal strength, internal resilience. You can imagine doing this in water, feeling the pressure of the water against the palms of your hands, for instance. And how when your body's thinking that there's some kind of resistance to whatever they're doing, the quality of the movement changes, the nature of the movement changes. We could just sit here without moving the rest of the body doing this, because there's no resistance. But since we imagine the resistance, our body will more naturally again use more to move against that resistance. And so in doing this, we cultivate this quality of internal strength through the use of different images and ideas. One more time. And then loosely fist your hands. You should be able to get a finger comfortably down. Start with your hands palm up, they would be palm up, fist open. Winding things. Look at this movement from the side. I'm just going to do this with one arm. If I simply move my arm, this is how far. If I go any further than this, and I start to pull on my shoulder into my arm. And then the other way of looking at this is that I keep my arm in position. I just rotate, puts my body moving forward. The next exercise is called punch with both fists. So I'm going to bring This back in now. And again, you can imagine a sense of resistance. Like this sort of resistance you get in water. It's important that that is a kind of what I would call soft resistance, a fluid resistance rather than something hard. When we move in water, we move in a particular way. Courage is this sense of releasing and softening in joints and muscles and so on and so forth. That's what we're looking for here, not a bunching up of things. Opening your fingers, turning your hands out, opening the chest, and then bringing your hands in and pressing. And then from here, turning your hands palm down, turn a little bit to your left. Ease forwards, let that move up, push your hands out, swing across, sit back, come back to the center, settle into the center, change direction. Polishing the table. You see with this one, it's very clear rhythm. There's an extending stage and a contracting stage. Yang, Qi. Another feature that we can begin to notice, and this thing relate all the movements in one way or another, is the way that we take that extension and contraction. We can think of it as an expansion from the center part of the kind of contraction back into that part of the body where we settle. And then we move again, not enough. I said earlier that there's a very grounded quality here. Another way of describing it might be very centered. And in doing that, we're thinking partly about this physical center of the body, how this hips, waist, how when we move there, the rest of the body follows. Now it's that part of the body that we really want to get the feelings dropping towards the ground. One more time. And then much of what I'm talking about can be quite difficult. Our attention quite naturally goes to the upper part of our body more than the lower part of our body. These are generalizations, but I think we probably recognize this. There's more to our hands and our arms than, say, our feet and the movement of the weight. So we're encouraging this change of perspective of what's happening within the body and how that relates to the outer world. And so, for instance, moving from the root, or sometimes talk about moving from the ground, makes a tremendous difference to our overall mobility, to our stability. You see that a bit more clearly, that probably comes in standing. And yet our attention consistently drifts back to the upper part. Now, here, your weight distribution, again, a little bit of weight in your feet. Gently push down through your front feet, your back and spine lengthening, and then contract. If I exaggerate this, you can see from the saying that is mostly felt. Look at my head. See that my head goes down and then goes up as I push down. This is exaggerated, it shouldn't be that big, but the point is that this is very subtle movement upwards and downwards through the body. And as always, letting the arms express that, bringing the hands as though you're cradling the ball. A gentle push down through feet and hips. You give enough energy to push the arms up, turn them over, let your hips drop, shoulders drop, and your arms drop. One more. Turning your hands out. What is? Maybe incorporating qualities that the image of the bird in flight pull up. It's important though not to get distracted by the images. Important to recognize that not every image is going to work for us all the time. So if an image doesn't produce a sort of resonance, something that you feel is worthy of bringing into to the movements, it's not necessarily that you're doing something wrong, it just might not be the right image for this time. And then this time, as your hands come down, tilt forward slightly, let your hands pass in front of your shoulders. Sitting back into your hips and pushing up, your body expanding, pushing your arms away. This is parting the hips. Keeping that pattern of expansion and contraction, letting your hands drop down and then focusing on one side, expanding, pushing the arm up, dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Wind around, bring your hand back. Same thing on the other side, pushing up. And there's a little space in between the two sides where your attention moves from your arm, side of your body, to your center, and then sort of out the other side. This time, bring both hands to a point on your center, and then extending upwards, bringing the length in your back and spine, and then pushing out. Pushing in two directions. When I point out certain characteristics of the movement, the internal aspects, it's not, I'm not trying to give you a definitive list. You may well observe, no, in so many ways you'll be kind of intending to observe subtle changes, within your body, and don't assume that they're constant. People are familiar with these exercises. You know, what worked last week might not be appropriate this week. So we begin to learn about some changing nature within the body, and even beginning to sort of discriminate a little bit. It's like maybe you're doing something in your shoulder that doesn't help the movement. So then the intention would be to not do that in one way. This time changing into 4 directions with the simple agency of turning in the center of the body. Noticing how in the move from change from one direction to another, those internal patterns of expansion, contraction, change in one way or another. Come around. You're moving through them. So as you push out sideways, extending one foot, let the heel rest on the ground, knees slightly curved, tilting forwards, scooping the sea and looking at the sky. Your hips drop back, that draws the shoulders over. It's important not to stiffen up and try and pull yourself up with a tightness in your back. It's more like flopping into your favorite armchair. So I get to here and then I just sit back, oh, like that. It's got that. Obviously, that's not quite how the movement goes, but your hips dropping back, really drawing head and shoulders up loose. And this time, rolling your fingers into a hollow fist and grasping the tiger's index. Beginning to value the role of, in particular your hips, the whole of the center of the body, but how when gravity is allowed to pull your hips back, down, the tendency is for your upper body to become more upright, maybe even a little bit straighter. One more time, excuse me, yawning. And then switch sides. Expanding in the front, then contracting, and as you contract in the front, expanding between hips and shoulders, and then change. And then grasping the tiger's hips. Where the changes from one movement to another, the changes in the patterns of movement, patterns of the flow of energy, from one stage of the movement to another, where you're feeling those expansions and contractions, and of course between one movement and another. and bring. And again, I would emphasize for those people with more experience in this, some of those patterns are consistent, but some will vary. And that can be quite fascinating. It's like walking out to your garden or a favorite spot in the park or something like that. And the general layout's the same, but there are subtle differences. And just as the clouds and the plants and the animals will change somewhat with the seasons. So we change with the seasons, with circumstances in our lives. Some things are more constant than others. Rubbing your hands together again. Excuse me. Tapping over your face. And then over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. Using this as a way of preparing your body to stand, warming yourself up a bit, loosening yourself up on the other side and the upper part of the chest. Your belly and your legs. Pushing your heels up. Working the muscles of your legs a little bit more, and then circling them around, doing the rotation in your hips and back in. Okay, and then standing. You can leave the chair with you. It can be interesting with some of these movements. Have a little bit of support from the chair, because that can sometimes create the space for us to notice other things that are going on. So, feet parallel. Looking for the same qualities in our posture of being rooted, the stability that comes with that, and the alignment with gravity. Letting your hips sink and bringing your hands around. So it's rooting down, pushing up, then your body expand and contract. And then do these moves as a sequence, turning your hands out, going into the standing version, the wild goose. And then parting the clouds. And when we do the movements in a little sequence like this, we begin to appreciate those subtle changes that I was talking about, also the similarities. We may even find that we become aware of some aspects that aren't that useful. And maybe you're doing something with your shoulder when you part the clouds or something like that. It doesn't actually help the movement. And so that intentionality can encourage the more appropriate movements within the body, but we can also use it to somewhat discourage the movements that the aspects that aren't actually enhancing the movement. We may do that by imagery, by simple attention, by maybe a change in how we're doing the movement or in our posture. There's many ways that we can do that, but we gradually learn to do that, to remove. It's like weeding your garden. You choose the plants that are going to stay there. You take out the ones that you don't need. It's a process of cultivation. And this time adding up another movement to the sequence. And it's quite an interesting change, this one, because we change to dragon plucks the stars from the sky. Noticing how your attention and your intention are very much part of this process of changing from one movement to another. So, for instance, and it is a for instance, here and rooting down with expansion in belly and lower back. As we go into The wild goose, start off with that expansion, but well, where it moves up into the solar plexus. And then belly to solar plexus to up into the chest for parting the clouds. And then for dragon plucks the stars from the sky, that same progress upwards, but just on one side. And then the other. And then back to rooting down. But again, that's not a definitive list. What else do you notice? What is most likely to enable you to enhance the movement? You get a fuller sense of the movement, get a smoother, more fluid movement. The last time. And just stand. You can step forwards with one foot, keep the width of your step, and using the ground, moving your weight forwards. Aware of how maybe your posture might change a little bit as you move. So give yourself a time just to realign yourself at the end of each transfer of the weight. Again, you can imagine doing this in water, particularly with more experience. As you go forwards, this denser quality in the front of your body as it pushes against the water. And then the change into that same feeling in the back. Begin to feel as though it's not just moving through water, but there's water within your body flowing into the back of the movement, flowing into the front of the movement. If that's a useful image to you, that becomes part of your intention, part of how we generate the movement from the being. And it's quite an interesting image because not only does the water go forwards, but it goes down. And this is important. We loop down, we reground ourselves in between each stage of the movement. And as we do that, that's when we begin to raise our toes and our heel. We become more fully into the supporting leg here, into the front leg. My back knee goes forward, my heel rises more aligned over that back foot and so on, until we're able to just, again, take a step, bringing the foot in. If it's going forwards, your heel goes down and then your toes, and then that all of the foot goes down when you're stepping backwards before then. On the other side. But the more we can bring these internal aspects into the movement, the more the effort is distributed through the body, the less there's likely to be a strain on a particular part of the body. Obviously, your legs are working quite hard, but we can lose some of that tightness in, say, the back, the shoulders. We move with a greater sense of fluidity. We move with a greater sense of strength, of resilience. We move with less strain, more stability. And then beginning to raise the toes and so the flow of the movement and things like the stability that comes from the rooting down, a lot of these benefits, again, like in your garden, come from within. In the garden, the flowers grow out of the ground, out of their roots, and they're cultivated. Here, the movement comes from inside outwards, and again, it's cultivated. Stepping in. And then take a few steps either forwards or backwards, depending on where you have room. And change direction. Very quickly. And have your right foot forwards. Bringing the upper body back more into to the movement without losing that awareness of what's happening within the body, below the lower part of the body. Bringing your weight into the front foot, turn to your left. Let your arms just swing out and bring the rear foot in. Just dragonfly skin to water. Step back, go back, let your hands drop down, turn, bring in the front. And what you may find is you can bring the foot in and raise in the leg. As you bring your knee up, really focus on your hips sinking back. That's the, if you like, the counterbalance to that. And it's the hips sinking back that are really important key to the stability that we look for and to the alignment of the body. Remember when we did scooping the sea in the chair, how when the hips drop back into the chair, it brought our shoulders and head up. And then on the other side. So referring back to that point, there's an important point that when the hips go back, we come upright. So when you do this, try not to stiffen up. So I've got to hold myself up because you just get top heavy there. If you find yourself doing that, then see if you can just let your hips drop down. Hold on to a wall if it helps, just to get that feeling. So left foot forwards, going into the left foot, turning, feeling the expansion in the upper body and just bringing your foot in. So dragonfly skims the water. Quite a challenging movement. And then either forwards or backwards, depending on where you have space. Taking a few steps through. And then going back. One more time. And brilliant. Go back to your chairs. Sitting once again. And again, just think about how you come to this upright position. Are you straining, stiffening in neck and the shoulders? Well, can you get this sense of, if I imagine this is my back, and if I can push down on my elbow there, see how my hand comes up. If I can allow gravity, draw my hips down, I can come up with a lot more openness, a lot more spaciousness in the upper part of my body. One of the not always so obvious benefits of the rooting down is how the rooting down has a direct connection to this very graceful, open quality in our posture. It's like a tree has to put down roots so it can spread its branches out. Let your hands drop down to your sides and really emphasizing with this exercise that returning to the root, because you push your arms out, embrace tiger, return to mountain. And by that, you may have stiffened up a bit, but your hips drop, the shoulders drop, your hands are pulled in, and everything settles. And then from that root, once again, we push out. The mountain is this lovely image of what we call central equilibrium, the qualities of this basic posture. Open, spacious, but also strong, resilient, dynamic. Stillness about mountains, but also movement and energy. The tiger, sometimes said to represent just our daily lives, the ups and downs that we go through. Big ones, the small ones. Just feeling that we can come back to the mountain for its own sake, but also because it's from the mountain that we venture out again. So worth focusing on what it is that brings you back. If you can imagine a scenario, maybe you're waiting for the bus and it hasn't come. The shop you've been to is unexpectedly closed, or those little frustrations, those things that are just daily events for us that can be quite stressful when they build up. What would you like to think about at that moment? How would you de-stress? How would you come back to central equilibrium? Maybe it's something I've said, and maybe one of the images that I've used, or a sensation in your body, something you've realized yourself. It doesn't have to be something that I've said. These again are important takeaways for us. These are things that can actually bring the practice into our daily lives. One more time. Yes. And fantastic. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day. If you do have any questions, feel free to drop me an email or something like that. But apart from that, bye for now.